Ladies and gentlemen, MrCropper here. We are continuing with this guy, Lefty Philosophy. Now, today I have a very sophisticated setup, and I actually can see chat messages over here at the side while we go. So that's probably going to be a distraction and a disaster. We'll see. Well, this is the point where we were at when he was saying that I take the senses at face value and don't question them, which is not true. He's looking at a guy with glasses on. I take the senses to be our only connection to reality, so we'd better take loving good care of them and appreciate them, including wearing glasses if necessary. So I do not take the senses in an omniscient way. He is again showing that he is a Platonist, and the only thing that he can think of is perfect omniscience, perfect knowledge. Knowledge has to exist in a perfect way, which is some sort of infinity or something, or it can't exist at all. It's an either or, perfect or none, because he's a Platonist. All right, well, let's continue and see what is going on here.
That your sensory input may not always be correct. There is a ton of genetic inheritance and diseases that you can get that mess up your senses. Like, you could be blind, you could be deaf, you could be colorblind, you can have more or less susceptibility to the feeling of pain.
How would we define all of those unless we had a connection to reality to define them? But I will mention, because he mentions colorblindness, and a man born on a desert island who's colorblind, how would he know he was colorblind? He wouldn't be. If he were born on a desert island, there was nobody around him. Well, first of all, he had his mom, didn't he? But he gets wrecked on a desert island before he's old enough to have people explain colors to him, and then he grows up there. He would not be colorblind. Colorblindness means that other people have a perception you don't, and so they call you colorblind. He wouldn't be colorblind. He would simply see the shades of gray and green and blue that colorblind people see instead of purple and orange or whatever their limitations are. So he wouldn't be colorblind if there wasn't anybody around him who had better or more sensory perception than him. He's only colorblind when he's surrounded by people who have better or more sensory perception than him. Okay?
Wouldn't know these things, because if you lived on an island all by yourself and you were red-green colorblind and you didn't see the color green, how would you know that?
I don't think it's green that they can't see. I think they can see green because that's plants and stuff. What they can't see is purple or something. But how could they not see green? That would be really bizarre.
There is a way for us to know that, because we can use the collective experience of everybody around you to get a general idea of how our senses should work. If I were to go up and ask like 20 people, what color is this table, and they all say brown, then I have a pretty good reason to believe that the table is brown.
See, this is just his idiotic view of philosophy. Why do they have any more connection to reality than you? He has no answer for that. Lefty Philosophy, do you have any answer for that? Why do other people have a better connection to reality than you? Why do you have to check with them? Is it because you might be colorblind? Well, what reason do you have to suspect you're colorblind? Name it. Now, you're not actually naming any potential defect you might have, or any blindness or anything like that you might have. You're just saying, what if absolutely everything I know might not be true? And you have no reason to suspect that. If you have a reason to suspect that your vision is blurry, go to an ophthalmologist and get eyeglasses like I did. If you have a reason to suspect that your hearing is off, go get a hearing aid. Your senses connect you to reality. You are saying that some people can sometimes be born with some problems with your senses, therefore everybody can never trust any of their senses at all, and you always have to check with the group. That is really, really stupid. You do not see that connection doesn't follow? No, he does not see that connection doesn't follow.
However, if one person said the table was red, you'd have to figure out why, because maybe there's something wrong with that individual, or maybe there's something wrong with the 9 other individuals, and you just picked 9 individuals that were all.
And we're not going to learn anything by analyzing this stupid example in a vacuum. We'd have to look at a real situation where people disagreed, and we would have to analyze that to learn anything about disagreement.
All colorblind.
You have reason to think they're not. You say, oh, that was a bit funny. So your senses are correct, and I don't think you have any reason to say they're not.
And this is a base of objectivism, is that reality is real. And the only way for you to know what is real is through your senses, because that's all you're given to really measure what the outside world looks like. So for an objectivist, you have to keep this as an axiom, that whatever your senses.
Now watch what's going on here. This is pretty rich. He's just dissing on me because I'm so worried about this axiom here. Well, this is hilarious.
Perceive is real, and that reality exists.
And when you do have reason to say they're not, you always say that was a little bit of
measure what the outside world looks like. So for an objectivist, you have to keep this as an axiom, that whatever your senses receive is real, and that reality exists.
Yeah, you actually take that as an axiom too. That's why you don't walk in front of buses. And when you were a medic in Iraq, that's why you checked people's blood pressure and gave them medicine and stuff, because you trust your senses. So that's why you wore your flak jacket or whatever in your helmet. Oh, I didn't actually wear it. I believed in peace. Okay, yeah. All right. This is the type of guy who arguing against me will argue against things that that weren't an argument. They were just a statement of mine. But anyways, there he is saying that the poor precious little axioms are no big deal for him. He's willing to question whether or not reality even exists. And he takes me to be a very strange idiot who is not willing to question whether reality exists. And he's just a D2 Kantian.
When you do have reason to say they're not, you always say that was a little bit of an illusion or something like that. So what is your evidence that none of your sensory evidence?
See how he said none? I never said that. I said some of your sensory information could be false.
All right, well, what follows from that? Why do you keep bringing it up? I know that some of it can be false. That's why I've got glasses on. What follows from that, though? Just because, see, what I believe follows from that is you should go get glasses or a hearing aid. What do you think follows from that? Do you think what follows from that is we can't trust ourselves and we should always check with the group? That seems to be what you think follows from it. I think you should go get glasses. You think, therefore, you can never trust anything of yourself and you've got to go check with the group. Well, why is the group able to trust their senses? Why are 9 people able to get together and trust their senses? Isn't that just a bunch of broken bricks piled together? How does that make a house if every single brick is broken? If you are a broken brick, why do other people get to pile together a bunch of broken bricks and build something solid and you have to go check with them? You don't see the flaw in that thinking? Who is the solid foundation? Is it not the individual?
You have no evidence. Now, that is a position that objectivists like to describe or think of as radical or zealous skepticism.
These are buzzwords in the objectivist community. They like to say these things because it makes them sound like they know a big word, but it's really just word salad. Doesn't fucking mean anything.
Calling him a D2 type radical skeptic. That is not word salad. That is a very carefully crafted integration that objectivists have worked years on identifying all the pieces and parts of. And Leonard Peikoff is the genius behind the dim hypothesis. And you are a D2 type, sir, and you are REKT.
Skepticism or zealous skepticism is where you just doubt everything, no matter what. And if you just doubt everything, even things that you have no grounds to doubt, what is that? What kind of thinking is that? That's junk thinking.
It's junk thinking to doubt everything. Not,
yep.
But it's not junk thinking to take everything at face value.
Do I take everything at face value? The guy wearing glasses? What do you mean by take everything at face value? No, that is not junk thinking. To believe your senses is not junk thinking. To believe your senses until you have a reason to suspect there's something wrong with them, that is not junk thinking. That's quality thinking.
It's a weird position to take. Like, it's okay to be skeptical about things and to question things, right? But he says, no, you don't question your senses. Whatever you see, hear, feel, touch, and however your brain interprets it, that is reality.
Yeah. What else would reality be? You agree with me. That's why you don't walk in front of buses. You agree with me.
Just stand out everything.
That's the funny thing. In these axioms, he agrees with and accepts and talks accepting. He says that he doesn't accept them and they're just hypotheses. But he accepts them the whole time.
Even doubt that I exist. You know? If you're a junkie as that, you're nowhere better than Descartes. That's junk thinking. Of course you exist. That's nonsense. You do exist and there is a reality. Now, if that's true, start there. We'll go from there. And what evidence do you have that your senses are a total illusion? Here's a little.
And I never said that they were a total illusion. I may have brought that up as saying there is a school of thought that thinks that you may be an illusion. All I said was that there are certain illusions that the brain can see or interpret that make your senses seem false.
That make your senses seem false. Well, wouldn't that be making them a total illusion then? His thinking is not very clear on this. Your senses are not a total illusion, but we do have some evidence that they are false. Well, if your senses are false, what does that mean? What does that mean? Can you link two ideas together? You just keep the idea that they're not a total illusion. They're just false. You just keep those separate. You just cannot link any two ideas together, can you? This is the D2 type. Any given idea is separate from any given other idea by their nature. No ideas ever connect in any way. This is the D2 mentality. He can believe both those things at the same time.
About this line. They tell me that reality is all an illusion, and I wonder how they escape the delusion. They tell me reality is built by perception, but I wonder how they escape the deception. Who's telling you this crap? Who's telling you reality is not real and your senses can't access it? What evidence do they have? What evidence do they offer you? No, your senses stand. You are in contact with reality, and you are the one who's responsible for dealing with reality. Forget what they told you about. They said, whoever it is, a philosopher or a group of people or the preacher, whoever it is that says to you, your mind can't contact reality, you don't know anything. Flip them off, dude. Just flip them off.
Yeah, because I should only listen to Ayn Rand, who's basically on the same level that he's saying, like, why do you believe what Ayn Rand
I didn't say only listen to Ayn Rand. I said listen to yourself.
says? Like, why does she have any validity and these other people don't?
She is not giving you the same type of orders they are giving you. They are telling you to doubt yourself. She is telling you to use your own mind. So why should you trust Ayn Rand? You shouldn't. You should use your own mind. She's not telling you what to think. They are. She's telling you to think for yourself. Now, why should you do that? If you are arguing against me, if you're saying, why should I think for myself? Why shouldn't I take other people's thinking? Okay, I got you to say it.
Now, somebody once asked Christopher Hitchens, they said, all these people say to me things like, you need Jesus to get through your life. And how do I say, when they have such passion, how do I say that they're wrong? And Christopher Hitchens says, oh, you just tell them to fuck off.
And that's exactly what he's doing, is he's using passion to get people to be persuaded, because he actually gives no real arguments for a lot of my critiques. And if you look at the comments on...
What critiques did you give? What argument could I give against your nonsense fluff? I've destroyed everything you said. Go ahead and make a video after I'm finished with this, and just make it a short clip and just make a compilation of the things that I haven't answered. Go ahead, just say, MrCropper, you haven't answered this, or this, or this. Just do it a short video. Don't explain your questions. Just give me the damn questions that I haven't destroyed.
Some of these YouTube videos, and I ask them to give me a rebuttal or to refute a certain statement, they just punt the ball around or move the goalpost. They never actually attack the idea that I brought up.
Give an example. No examples? No examples.
And that's what you need to do when somebody tells you that your sensory organs aren't making sense to you. What the hell do they know? Do their sensory organs make sense? So they figured it out, and they're telling you that it's all nonsense.
Yeah, doctors figured it out, dumbass. You know, we have ways to measure certain things. Like we have ways to look at like stigmatism or problems with the cornea in the eye and things like night blindness. And
so because doctors can define disease, therefore you don't trust your senses. How would they define disease if there weren't healthy senses? See, he does not trust his senses because doctors have defined diseases. That's a stupid idea. That's a stupid thought. That's a low IQ thought. Do you connect those ideas? You just hold those two things separate, don't you? There are such things as diseases, therefore the senses are not reliable. How would we know that the senses are not reliable in those diseased people if we couldn't measure them against reliable sense data?
What? He's fucking
No, of course,
stupid.
all that's nonsense. You have to flush all that away. We can deal with reality individually. Each of us can decide for ourselves what reality is. Okay?
See, and that's dangerous thinking. Is each of
Now he's going to make up. Now, how is he going to show it's dangerous for us to view reality on our own? How is he going to show that that's dangerous for us? The only thing he could possibly do is some sort of bizarre, contrived example, which will be easily dismantled.
of us can decide for ourselves what reality is. Why is that dangerous thinking? Here's a good thought experiment. Say for instance that you are walking out of Home Depot, right? And in front of you, you see a white van stop and two men come out dressed in all black and they grab a woman who's kicking and screaming and they put her in the back of the van. You, being a rational person, for some reason also have a gun, you pull your gun out and you fire into the van and kill the driver. Turns out that was a college kidnapping prank.
Well, we would have a situation for that. We call mens rea, a concept of guilt and desire to do damage. And this would go to a jury, and the jury would find maybe that the person had acted in haste and he would be charged with manslaughter. He shouldn't have been shooting so quickly like that or something like that. He should have given them the option to yell that it's a prank or something. Maybe he shot too quickly and he would and should be charged with manslaughter. But the jury would also see that this was not premeditated murder and that this guy is not a murderous maniac who was out trying to murder people. He was responding to what he thought was a kidnapping. Now, what might also happen in that situation is the people involved in that stupid prank might also get charged with manslaughter because they were involved in the person's death as well. And so they might do several years in prison themselves. So we would have ways that we would deal with a situation like this. And the person who is supposedly his ability to judge reality for himself, he pulled out his gun and he shot someone who was trying to kidnap somebody. I mean, what would you do then? You would just stand there. If Lefty philosophy was there, he would just stand there and say, well, I can't trust my own judgment of reality. I'm going to have to wait for somebody else to act. Or maybe he would call the police, right? But maybe he wouldn't call the police because who knows? Maybe it's just a prank. Can't trust my own senses. We'll have to check with the group. Maybe he would take out a little form and start questioning the people around him. Did you see the same thing that I saw?
And they were just pranking. And you just killed somebody based upon your perception of reality. That's the problem with living in like kind of your own bubble without asking other people or getting a sense of.
So bad example. Your example is REKT. Give another example of when you trust your own version of reality to your detriment. Now, if you do give an example of it, I'm going to say, well, there you go. They should have checked with reality more carefully. Like, for example, if you believe that mailboxes are fuzzy when in fact they're actually sharp-cornered objects, and that's because you have poor eyesight, I'm going to say, well, you should have checked with reality better. So go ahead, try another example. That example's garbage. REKT.
Reality from a collective view of everybody else.
With our five senses in the mind, and it's a real reality. Now, if you're stupid and you make an accident, you step in front of a bus, you die. You can't be stupid. Okay? Now, if you're stupid like Immanuel Kant and Descartes, you'll kill hundreds of millions of people over time. All right, what do we need to get back?
Yeah, I know what he's talking about, but I can't think about it off the top of my head. I think it has something to do with like the altruism is bad and altruism leads to people dying, or communism or socialism. He falls into all those fucking memes.
Absolutely.
And you don't buy that, huh? That altruism is bad and communism and socialism are examples of altruism? You don't think that that's the case? No rebuttal, just an eye roll from him there.
Don't take these people seriously when they say you have no mind and you can't think for yourself.
But do listen to this guy as he tries to tell you Ayn Rand is like immortal.
Is that what I said? When I said you should trust your own mind and your own thoughts and not let anybody tell you that you're wrong. Is that what I said, that Ayn Rand is immortal?
Do listen to him.
They're just talking about themselves. They're just projecting.
Yeah, do listen to me when I tell you to think for yourself. That's so leading people astray to tell them to think for themselves.
All right, rewind a little to make sure we don't miss it. A contact with reality through perception. That won't be obtaining knowledge through that perception. Whether or not this knowledge is true is a different subject. No, that's the central theme. It's the central theme. It is true knowledge, and it's the only true knowledge we have.
Okay, so that's an axiom for objectivism to be true, is that reality is real. So if I were to pose a question that has anything to do with questioning the validity of reality, he automatically rejects it and doesn't even entertain it, because reality has to exist in order for his objectivist theory to hold true.
That becomes the
Yeah, you automatically reject anything like that too. I mean, everybody does. When we open our mouth, we accept that we exist and that we have a mind. So anytime you open your mouth, you accept the axioms that you supposedly are trying to keep a cool head about, and you're saying that I accept them, but you don't. I'm just being some sort of weird idiot about it. You're accepting them too, you moron.
the five senses.
And through conversations with this guy, whenever I bring up a question about a basic axiom, like disproving, let's on the instance of will, that maybe free will doesn't exist, he automatically shuts it down, like, oh, that's preposterous. Of course it exists because objectivism said so. So he cannot even.
Not because objectivism said so. Objectivism says it exists because it does exist. Free will exists. You know this through basic introspection. And anybody who tries to get out of it, it has a very, very long job ahead of them, and they look like idiots.
And entertain ideas
As Christopher Hitchens said, of course we have free will. We have no choice in the matter.
outside of that. It's really weird.
Most of the definition critics I do disagree with. While I believe that one can sense reality through their senses, I do not trust everyone's senses on face value.
Who said you need to trust everybody's senses? But it is a holy commandment that thou shalt trust your own senses. Okay? And test them. Make sure that they're right.
Remember, this is coming from a guy wearing eyeglasses. So what do I believe about the senses? Do I believe that they are omniscient and perfect and platonic? Or do I believe that they are a connection to reality? What do I believe? Do I believe they are a connection to reality, or do I believe they are perfect, platonic, and omniscient? What do I believe?
And when they're wrong,
You should trust them and then test them. Think about that. Usually, trust involves some sort of testing first. Like, that's the prerequisite. You can't trust something until you have a reason to do so.
Now, if you want to look at this analogy, then I believe the testing started the day I was born, okay? So test and trust, test and trust, test and trust. By the time I was 5, I knew pretty well what was going on. And when I was 13 and my eyesight started getting a little bit fuzzy, I knew that I could used to read a clock across the room, but now I couldn't. Okay, so if you want to take his analogy, test, trust, fine. I started that the day I was born.
If it was your first time doing it, you wouldn't trust that it would work. Like if I were to drop a pen on the desk for the first time and I didn't know anything about gravity, right?
So he's talking about a newborn baby then. Okay, I started testing and trusting the day I was born.
Would drop it and it would fall and I would pick it up. There's no reason. I mean, there could be a little reason for me to believe that the next time I do that, it's going to happen exactly the same way and fall at the same rate.
So there he is. There he is trying to invoke David Hume. Absolute rabid skepticism. Just as an obvious conclusion that you could drop a pencil and then the next time you try to drop it, it may or may not drop the same way. You have no clue. No idea what's going to happen the second time. Well, maybe some idea, he says. But he's trying to invoke Humean rabid skepticism that you don't know if the sun's going to come up tomorrow just because it came up today.
So the trust is built through the testing, and he wants it the other way, which is you can't fucking do that.
you know, see a doctor or something, you know, like there's a problem, you know. So you are the judge of reality. You are your judge of reality.
And this is, if you see a common theme here, the individualism, the sole arbiter of everything is the individual, and nothing else matters.
But you're also
Do you propose something else? You don't propose something else? Because if you don't propose something else, then you're going to have to adopt my system of the individual being the center. What do you propose? What do you propose to be the center of every consideration, if not the individual?
so the judge of reality, because you're the guy who sits over your own reality. You're the judge, right? Now, when you said you don't trust everybody's sense perceptive, forget about everybody. Maybe they're wrong. If they're wrong, prove them wrong. What do you have to vote on or something? It's up to you. It's between you and reality. Every individual is an item. And the people that they interact with around them can be the most important things in their life, but they're still an individual.
Our senses can be deceived.
Yeah. Now, how would we know that? You see, it's not.
How would we know that? We would get the collective experience of everybody else around us and try to validate the things that we see or think. You would have to ask some other people, but individually, you could have, it'd be like one half of the equation. You see those things.
There's his view of collectivism. Now, insofar as a man is colorblind, he's only colorblind because people around him have other senses that he doesn't. He wouldn't be colorblind on a desert island. Unless he would. Is it the case that someone who's colorblind would have difficulty telling the difference between different types of shrubbery? I mean, if that's the case, maybe it is maybe colorblindness is an actual thing that would die out in the wild or something like that. I don't actually know that much about colorblindness, but you know, if nobody in society could hear, then everybody would just get along without that sense. There are communities of deaf kids. Is it deaf kids? Yeah, deaf kids who have their own sign language. And it's an amalgamation of the different languages because they all come from different neighborhoods or whatever and stuff, and they have many different languages, and they get put together in these terrible little orphanage homes for deaf kids, and they have a sort of pidgin language of their own, a sign language. So if you don't have, you know, we have 5 senses. If you only have 4, then you just get along with those 4. They are still your only connection to reality, whatever they are. And checking with the group isn't going to necessarily clarify whether or not your senses are true. Your senses are true. So, and a group doesn't matter. A group can't tell you anything about them. A doctor can tell you in a scientific way exactly what's going on, but that's just scientific knowledge. You perceptually know that your eyes are fuzzy. You perceptually know that that rock over there is actually sharper than it looks 50 yards away. So you don't ever need to check with the group to know about your sense perception and reality. In the single example of color blindness, it still does not call your sensory evidence into question. Just because there can be some flaw somewhere, sometime, does not call the nature of sensory evidence into question. So, can you make a case against the nature of sensory evidence as such, or is the only thing you can do is mention that some people are born retarded?
You would never know if you were colorblind until you asked other people. That is my argument.
It's not a material concern. The fact that we can know that.
All right, if that's his argument, then that's REKT.
That they can be deceived means, right, that we must have some sort of connection to reality. A good.
And the reality is not just from ourselves. Like if you were born on an island with nobody around you, how would you know that you were colorblind?
You wouldn't be colorblind. Colorblindness is a comparison to other people. Now, just like you wouldn't be deaf, you would simply be what you were. Now, a deaf person would probably get eaten by a tiger, right? So we can call that a limitation and a dangerous thing in reality or stuff like that. But if you are around a bunch of deaf people, you simply find a way to get along. You use the senses that you have. So the fact that our senses can be limited and broken doesn't prove that our senses are not a connection to reality. It simply proves that our senses are our only connection to reality, that even when they're limited and broken, even when we're deaf or blind or something like that, still the only way to connect through reality is our remaining senses.
You wouldn't. It would be impossible for you to know that because as soon as you were born, you would never see those things. So if you were the sole arbiter of your reality and there was no such thing as red, well, your reality's kind of fucked up because red does exist. You just can't see it.
I do sometimes wonder about the poor, impoverished imaginations of people before neon colors. And then in the 1980s, neon shoelaces and neon shirts and neon toys came around. Everything before that was very blah colors. And they couldn't, I mean, I couldn't even imagine these colors before they existed. So what color is going to come to us in the future we can't even imagine now? I don't know. But neon is a pretty interesting set of colors.
Clear, solid connection, or else we wouldn't be able to figure out illusions and delusions and hallucinations.
So much information being thrown at our brains, it's almost impossible for us to dissect every bit that comes into our minds.
Okay, you do have to focus. Yeah, you have to choose what to focus on, too. Now, why is that an objection?
And no, I didn't say this as a matter of focusing, but like,
I know you didn't, but that's what you are talking about. You're talking about the fact that our mind focuses, and he understands it to some extent because he now goes into an analogy with computing power and the fact that our mind just has a limited amount. So if you accept that our mind is a computer with a limited amount of power, then why do you object against our mind by saying that it can only focus on a certain amount? It can't get everything in reality all at once. You admit that it's a computer with a certain amount of power and it can't do everything at once. So why can't you work within its nature? Why do you have to say, there, it has a specific nature, therefore it's nothing, which is basically your argument. Because the human mind has a specific nature and doesn't know everything at once, therefore the knowledge it has is not knowledge. That's your non sequitur. That is your junky non sequitur.
your brain has a certain amount of like computing power, and it can only input and process so many things correctly before it starts to like take shortcuts and input information. These are things that we go in later in the video with the tritone experiment, the hand experiment. And
oh, see, he takes it in a totally different direction. Instead of saying your brain has a limited amount of information processing, he says your brain is limited and makes mistakes, or and is ambiguous, or something like that. So he's just bringing up these little teeny things, these stupid little experiments where they can trick you or something like that, or where things sound weird, an auditory illusion or something like that. So he jumps right from the fact that we're connected to reality, and without even stopping there, without even saying, yes, we're connected to reality, he says, we are connected through bizarre mistakes, bizarre illusions, bizarre delusions, right? He didn't even stop on the we are connected to reality. He just jumps right to our senses. Scientists can make up weird little experiments where our senses are tricked in some silly little way. He doesn't even stop with the connection to reality. Let's see that again.
so many things correctly before it starts to like take shortcuts and input
Can only do so many things correctly before it starts to do shortcuts.
information. These are things that we go in later in the video with the tritone experiment, the hand experiment, and some of the other things.
So it's a shortcut. It's a delusion about reality. See, he just goes right to that. That's his goal. That's his solid ground. He can't see any of the ground around him that the senses connect us to reality. All he can see is the little delusions or illusions that scientists have come up with. That's the only thing he can see that the senses actually do. We have an auditory illusion when you do tritone, and we can't tell if it's going up or down, and people disagree on whether it's going up or down in tone, or in what? Well, the tone's going up and down, and people disagree on something going up and down. Is it ascending or descending? And people disagree on it. And what does that tell us? Does that tell us that our ears are completely useless and give us no connection to reality at all? You see, he does. I think he takes it that way. He says our hearing, because scientists have made up this stupid little auditory thing there where people disagree on some definition of something in some little auditory tone thing, therefore, and he's already got the therefore. He doesn't need to follow it through. His therefore has already occurred. We do not have a connection to reality. So when he sees that, he just sees that as confirmation. Oh, see, we're hallucinating. You see, he just starts off by saying we're not connected to reality. That's his basic assumption. So when he sees these illusions, they are simply a confirmation of his basic assumption. We are not connected to reality. So 99.9% of his hearing he just dismisses because scientists have made up this one little thing where people disagree on whether it's ascending or descending tones.
Your brain can only process so many things before it will make a mistake. That's just the way it is.
What would be a mistake then? How would we say that the brain has made a mistake? Would we go in and we would show that the brain thought this was happening when actually that was happening? How would we then know what's actually happening? Are you saying that our senses are reliable and we do have access to reality? No, I bet he's not willing to make that. He certainly isn't. And if he did, he would say, yes, our senses are connected to reality. Yes, we do have access to reality. But people are born colorblind, so we can't trust everything.
Of any kinds to anything. What are you saying? Are you saying we're not omnipotent and omniscient? Of course we're not. So what? So what? What do you mean? I'll just rewind and give you a chance to say it again. Why is that? That was it. We're going to go 12 seconds. Why is that a material concern that a lot of things come at us and we can't get them all or whatever?
Everyone's senses on face value. Our senses can be deceived. With so much information being thrown in our brains, it's almost impossible for us to dissect every bit that comes into our minds.
Okay, our senses can be deceived. It's almost impossible for us to dissect everything. So that's just an adjunct to our senses can be deceived. So it's not really a material concern. I think I've addressed. I don't want to keep drilling on that point. Let's move ahead a little bit.
You didn't make a fucking point.
All right, if I didn't make a fucking point about that, if you didn't hear my point about that, then you're not watching the video. Lame. Our senses can be deceived. That's actually all we've talked about, really. So if you watched this video up to this point and think that I haven't made any point about whether or not our senses can be deceived, then I just leave it with the fair-mindedness of the audience. This guy is as dumb as a post.
Information that we may have not received. This causes us to have.
How do they fill those gaps in? Did you ever give thought to that? Do you think a 6-month-old would look at those experiments and see the exact same thing? You have seen shadows millions of times. You know, a 6-month-old doesn't see shadows the same as you, or whatever, a 2-month-old, whatever you want to do. So it's your brain knowing and learning things over time. In fact, if you ever watch the footage of Men on the Moon, you can either say that's got to be fake, or you can look at it and say,
never seen Man on the Moon or whatever he's talking about.
So your brain's not built to observe things at 1/3 Earth gravity. It just doesn't have the predictive.
All I'm saying here is that the footage looks bizarre too. If you've seen a hammer drop and you see the hammer on the moon drop, it looks a little strange. It drops fairly slowly. And the feather drops exactly next to it. Not the way you'd think a feather floats down. It drops straight down like a rock. And it drops at exactly the same speed as the hammer. And it just looks a little bit weird. Especially if you look at them and you say, okay, that's a feather and that's a hammer. How are they going to act? They act differently than you expect if you turn your brain on and ask yourself, what do you expect? It's not a big deal. It's not a philosophical deal. I'm just saying that our senses are trained in the reality that we're in. Our senses are not omniscient. They're not omnipotent. They are not without a nature. They are not in a vacuum. Our senses exist and they are trained in this reality to deal with these shadows that we see in this lighting, in this world, with these colors and these textures. And if you saw different colors and textures and lighting, then you would have to learn about it and adjust. Just like when we saw different behavior on the moon, they took a video of it, and the video is famous for a reason, because it looks a little bit weird to see a feather and a hammer dropping rather very slowly, and it just looks weird. Not a big philosophical point, and he thinks he can make a point against me on it, which is his level of arguing. So I just want to stop here to say that it's not a big philosophical point and elaborate a little bit about what I meant, and then just show that he is not making any points by arguing against my non-argument.
Power sees something fall and says, okay, boom. Oh, right. Oh, that's weird. And it just sort of floats down weird, like a feather or something. Have you seen the hammer on the moon float down? He dropped a hammer and a feather, and they just both floated down. The feather didn't float like so, it floated like a rock. All right.
I don't know why he's fucking laughing. Thinking when he's talking about the shadows, it's because like our brain fills shadows in for us. So like there's certain illusions that come up from that. And then he goes on this weird tangent about a hammer and a feather falling in a vacuum or with no gravity and how it's weird. It's actually not if you understand scientific principles behind those things. It's also been demonstrated here on Earth, and there's a YouTube video of them doing this experiment inside of an anti-gravity chamber. And when I saw it, I didn't question my senses.
I didn't question my senses either. But that's interesting that you didn't question your senses. So you trusted your senses, did you? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's the D2 type. He'll argue that he can't trust his senses, that he has to check with the group, that his senses could be wrong, that he could be born colorblind, his senses aren't reliable, you have to check with other people. And then just in the same video several minutes later, he'll turn around and argue he trusted his senses. He doesn't know why I wouldn't trust my senses. Of course he trusted his senses. That's stupid. Why wouldn't you trust your senses? And that's the D2 type. He can't even connect his own thoughts over the course of a goddamn video. Now there are a couple minutes left here where he is talking. All right, we better let him talk. He's not letting me talk anymore, so let's let him talk.
Understood that there was no air resistance to cause the feather to float. I understood the principles behind the things that I saw. While it may have looked weird, like seeing a new animal for the first time, it didn't cause me to question my senses.
Good, so your senses are reliable then, huh? Oh, well that contradicts everything you've been saying this whole time, you stupid moron.
However, my brain completing sentences for me while reading, filling in shadows, and also interpreting words and phrases as songs is an entirely different subject altogether. That is what I was talking about. You have no control over those actions. Through time and experience, your brain learns what information it can automatically predict in order to save some of that power for computing other things. The very fact that your brain can make a mistake at this point and destroy your understanding of all of the information after that.
Wait, make a mistake and destroy your understanding of all that information. You're not making a very good case for that. Because our brain fills in the gaps once in a while in a word that we don't hear or something like that. Therefore, our brain destroys our information. What?
In order to save some of that power for computing other things. The very fact that your brain can make a mistake at this point and destroy your understanding of all.
It makes a mistake? I thought it was filling in the gaps. And destroy all of your knowledge? What?
Through time and experience, your brain learns what information it can automatically predict in order to.
Your brain learns through time and experience that it can automatically fill in some blanks. Okay.
Save some of that power for computing other things.
And it does this because it's a finite machine that doesn't have infinite power. Okay.
The very fact that your brain can make a mistake at this point and destroy your understanding of all of the information after that is the.
Make a mistake and destroy your understanding of all the information after that. I'm trying to think of an example where your brain made a mistake and destroyed all your understanding of the information after that. Wow, that would be a crazy brain to live inside of that could make one little mistake and destroy all your understanding of the information after that. What example did he give of that? I can't remember. What I'm trying to concretize. What example was there of that? Where your brain made a little mistake at this point, whatever he means by at this point, and destroyed all your understanding of all the information after that. That's a disaster. When did that happen? I don't recall that.
No control over those actions. Through time and experience, your brain learns what information it can automatically predict in order to save some of that power for computing other things.
So through time and experience, your brain knows some shortcuts that it can make. Okay.
The very fact that your brain can make a mistake at this point and destroy.
Mistake? I thought it was filling information and shortcuts through time and experience. So it's experienced these over and over and over, and when it sees them, it just fills in a blank. Where was the mistake? I didn't see the mistake that you're talking about.
The very fact that your brain can make a mistake at this point and destroy your understanding of all of the information after.
That's a huge claim, to destroy your understanding of all the information after the mistake. What mistake? I thought it was just filling in gaps from experience. This is a D2 type. This is a D2 type. He goes from the fact that that he thinks that your brain is making something up somewhere to fill in some gap. Now, let's say we grant him that. We say, okay, the brain filled in a gap. It filled in a word that it didn't actually hear when someone was speaking or something. The brain filled in some little gap. Okay. He then says, the brain can make a mistake and destroy all of your understanding of all the information after that? That is an immense, very amazing, very powerful claim about a very dangerous brain that we had better be very careful with, or maybe even lock up and destroy and be hateful towards. What a terrible brain that would be. My goodness. Well, Lefty Philosophy, if you have any examples of when that happens, that would be good, because that's a really crazy, big, bald assertion you're making in public there, and you look like a goddamn idiot.
That is the problem that I'm talking about.
What problem are you talking about? You didn't ever mention anything about the brain making one little mistake and destroying all of your understanding of all the information after that. That's an enormous and bizarre claim.
Say, for example, like you're reading a sentence, and you read a sentence and your brain interprets a sentence to say something completely different than what was actually written. Let's say, for instance, your brain saw the ball is red and is very fast. However, on the actual page, it read ball is red and is very fast.
Now, is that going to destroy your ability to understand all the information after that? It will if they go on talking about that and you misunderstand. But then is that your brain making a mistake, or is that you just not reading carefully and you just misunderstood the sentence because you were just reading too fast and automatically and not paying attention to the words on the page and not focusing enough? Okay, so if you're unfocused and you misread a sentence, then you go on and you might not understand the material until you go back and reread the sentence more carefully. Okay, and what are you, a scientist who's going to design a sentence where it's hard for me to notice that the word of is missing or something like that? I've seen those.
Both of these have completely different meanings. And if something further on doesn't contradict the ball being red or vast, you would never second guess the information.
Okay, well, if something further on doesn't contradict that, that means that it's not really, that means that that information was contained in that sentence and everything after that didn't have anything to do with that. So if nothing else contradicts it after that, then I'd have no reason to question that. So that means that so his claim that it would destroy your ability to understand all information after that is not upheld in this example, because as he said, if it wasn't even mentioned after that, how would you ever know to suspect that sentence? Okay, bad example on your part then. Boy, it's too easy. It's too easy. What? Boy.
In your brain put there through its predictive or its ability to fill in the gap of information. There are millions of examples.
So a little teeny predictive blip in the brain. You have to go back and reread the sentence. What if the sentence didn't? What if the information in that sentence wasn't mentioned again? Well, then how does that meet your criteria of destroying your ability to understand all information after that? So try again. You did not make an example of what you were trying to make an example of.
I can put here, but I won't waste my time with it anymore, because you haven't proven the point that it isn't a problem when you build your entire foundation on the reality of your senses without questioning any of them. But yeah.
That sentence wasn't very clear in your head, was it? Let's see if we can figure out what the hell he meant.
Need to fill in the gap of information. There are millions of examples I can put here, but I won't waste my time with it anymore, because you...
Okay, he's not going to waste his time with this anymore because I did something. What did I do?
You haven't proven the point that it isn't...
I haven't proven the following point. All right. What is the point that I have not proven? That it isn't
a problem when you build your entire...
I have not proven that it is not a problem when you build your entire philosophy,
entire foundation on the reality of your senses without...
I haven't proven that it's not a problem when you build your entire foundation. I haven't proven that it's not a problem. Why so? So it remains a problem for me. Okay.
It isn't a problem when you build your entire foundation on the reality, because you haven't proven the point that it isn't a problem.
So it is still a problem for me. The following remains a problem for me.
when you build your entire foundation on the reality of your senses without questioning any of them.
So that's a problem for my philosophy, to build my entire philosophy on the reality of the senses without questioning any of them. He says to a guy who's wearing glasses, all right, you're a D2 type. You tell me your senses are valid when you're trying to argue against me, and then you tell them that they're invalid when you're trying to argue against me. So which is it? Are your senses valid or are they invalid? You don't know. You don't care. You don't take ideas seriously. You read Ayn Rand's philosophy like it's just another philosophy. You don't care. You don't take ideas seriously, and you're not going to argue against me in a serious manner. All you're going to say is that your senses are valid if I say one thing, and then you're going to say they're not valid when I say something else. When I said the hammer and the feather look a little funny falling on the moon, he says, oh, I didn't question my senses. Oh, didn't you? I thought this whole thing was about how you have to question your senses. D2 type, can't think, can't connect anything. Moron, beta.